The Real ResQ podcast is brought to you by SR3 Rescue Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. And Life Saving Systems Corporation. We do our work so you can do yours. Tough gear for tough jobs. SR3 Rescue Concepts is a training company that can help with your helicopter training, your standardizations and safety checks, or just your annual FAA refresher. They are ready to help your agency keep up to date and current with techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. The training staff is amazing. They have certified flight instructor pilots, experienced crew members. All of them offer training in rescue, medical, tactical, firefighting, and ground operations. SR3 is also partnered with Petzl to assist with PPE inspection courses, and the highly specific Lizard, which is used for helicopter cliff and mountain rescue. Contact them today at SR3RescueConcepts.com or over on Instagram at SR3_rescue. Then we have Life Saving Systems Corporation that manufactures the world's toughest helicopter rescue gear. From their Triton harness, which I personally absolutely love as a rescue swimmer, my favorite harness, to the rescue baskets and litters, and of course, the most popular hoist hook in helicopters, the D-Lock. The team at LSC cuts, bends, sews, welds, and machines these products into existence every day. Contact them today at lifesavingsystems.com or follow them on Instagram at Rescue Gear. That's at ResQGEAR. When you send a message to these guys, you just add in there, Quinny sent me, and they got your back. Our next guest is a super killer guy. He's been a friend of mine for quite a while now. And to listen to his career path and what he's done to go from nothing to where he's at now. Building programs, he's done rappel, he's done hoist, he's worked with power lines, he's done long line. He's got some knowledge on some helicopters, and it is awesome. I mean, you're talking about someone that has worked in Australia and Canada, and I'm very grateful that he came onto the show. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you from Squamish, Canada, working with Blackcomb Helicopters, Mr. Rob Munday. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ podcast. All right, cool. Well, in that case,
Send
ready
it.
to go?
Sure.
Let's do this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real ResQ podcast. I've got a great guest today. His name is Mr. Rob Munday, and he lives up in Squamish, Canada. Works with Blackcomb Helicopters up there. What's up, Rob? How are you today?
Quinny, how are you? Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Dude, I'm pumped to have you.
Yeah, man, this is gonna be sweet.
I really appreciate you coming in. So, give everybody a little background about you. Is you're a hoist operator and a rescue specialist, and the greatest part about it is that I was there. I was not there to train you, but I was there as like almost an instructor. And
you trained me one time. You can put your name on that for sure. You did.
Just a little bit, man. You were already like high speed. Me and Craig Potts were hanging out with you. It was a good time.
We had a great time together.
That was so fun. Oh gosh,
it was
a blast. So
that's a podcast in itself,
right? No kidding. Holy cow! Just a couple days we were together. Jeez.
Yeah.
Landed at a bar. Anyway, I don't want to get there. Don't go there.
It's another podcast.
Right. But Rob, if you don't mind, would you introduce yourself to everybody out there? Just kind of who you are, where you work, a little bit of experience, and go from there.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I appreciate the chance to be in such fine company here. So my name's Rob Munday. I'm originally obviously from Australia, not Canada where I'm at now. I am a citizen here, which is nice. Makes things a little bit easier with a passport. But born and raised in Australia, in Melbourne specifically, just out of Melbourne. And grew up in a house of emergency services type people. My dad was a volunteer firefighter. Mum was a nurse, so I was kind of around that sort of environment a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
And as soon as I was allowed to, I started getting into firefighting and the volunteer stuff with my dad, and sort of caught the bug, I guess, if you will. And as soon as I was able to, basically, turned 18, looked into going to university or college or something like that, and I was into the outdoors and looking to try and do something similar, and couldn't really decide what I wanted to do at that point. So I went and did a diploma in outdoor education. It was a 2-year diploma. And it's basically, I mean, it was just outdoor guiding and experience, and doing whitewater kayaking and mountain biking and hiking and navigation and
Dude,
survival
so
and all.
fun.
Yeah, it was summer camp for 2 years basically.
That's awesome.
Right? And for a guy who didn't really know what he wanted to do in the future, I didn't really have a career path or anything like that.
Got me out of the home and got me out in the real world and just
so so we did that 2 years, and then that was actually on a ski hill. So they built a college campus on a ski hill. And we didn't take our summer breaks. We took winter breaks. So and that allowed us to actually find work on the ski hill during the winter break and try and get industry experience, right? So
oh, dang, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was so much fun, man. So I was a ski instructor for many, many years there, 4 or 5 years of winters there. And to offset the winter season, I got into firefighting in the summertime. So as a seasonal job with our local forestry government agency there, doing seasonal firefighting stuff.
Nice.
Started off as a
were you going
ground
out in the field and doing all the basically the digs and the fire lines and
yeah, exactly. So to be, I guess, the closest thing in the US would be a hot shot.
Yeah.
Not quite as gnarly and as hardcore as a hot shot, probably. Those guys are on a different level in the US for sure, but similar idea. We were working on the ground, driving trucks and, heavy machinery, bulldozers, stuff like that, working.
Clearing the fire line and whatnot.
Digging line.
Sweet.
Exactly.
Dude.
So I did that for a year, and then someone mentioned to me that, hey, you can actually go and you can start flying around in helicopters doing this stuff, and I was like, well, this sounds good. So let's get into that. And
yes,
I did a year of groundwork, and then found a way to start flying, and basically got onto the Rappel Wildfire Access Program in Victoria in Australia. So did that for a year, and then in my first year there, long story short here, I worked with a guy from Alberta, Canada. He was a rookie with me on that fire crew, and he's like, man, if you think it's good here, you should come to Canada and try it out in Canada, because it's everything that we have here, but you fly more, you fight more fire. It's basically just like an expanded version of the same thing. Alberta's, if anyone who knows Canada, Alberta had a big oil and gas market, and it still does to a degree, but lots of money, right, from the government.
Yeah.
So they were throwing money at firefighting. You had a dedicated aircraft. It was great fun. So moved to Canada and started doing this seasonal thing back and forth there. Close to 10 seasons between Australia. I did 10 seasons between Australia and Canada, back and forth.
Wow.
Almost exclusively on a wildfire rappel program. And I worked my way through that up into, from a rookie to a ground pounder who had some leadership, and then, up into actually spending more time in the aircraft and dispatching or spotting guys, like a crew chief type position, sending guys down into the fires and that sort of thing. So
wow, sick. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then, that's when I really got the bug for the flying side of things. And we'll talk a little bit about getting back into search and rescue in Australia. So I went back to Australia, did some training there, and SAR specific training, and actually was lucky enough to get a job in Australia. And from there, worked a little bit there, had an opportunity to go back to Canada, and then I've done marine pilot transfer stuff in British Columbia, Canada for a couple of years. We started up a Hoist program for that, basically from the ground up, and that's Quinny, where you and I
that is where we met.
First time. You came in and taught me the nuances of hoisting to a boat, because I hadn't done a lot of that before. So that was really, really cool. And then from there, had the opportunity to jump on with Blackcomb Helicopters, where I'm at now, and that was in a full-time position to just enhance their hoist program and really try and get it to where it is today and beyond.
That's awesome. And Blackcomb Helicopters is it's a great story. But Blackcomb Helicopters. So they're not a search and rescue agency. Like they're a helicopter company.
Yeah, exactly. We're a private company and we operate 20, 21 aircraft depending on the week. It kind of fluctuates depending on workload, but quite a significant number of aircraft doing the whole range of like everything you can think of, from tourism to utility, power line maintenance. We do a lot of search and rescue. We do heli skiing. It's everything. It's a huge range of stuff for sure.
Yeah. So basically I roll up there and say, I need a helicopter for X. And you guys are like, oh, here's your helicopter and here much it costs.
Which one would you like?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Man, that's awesome. I'm ready to go heli skiing. You want to drop me out, dude? Are you coming with me? Come on.
Sure. I'm in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Canada, here I come. No, it's cut off from the US.
Right now. Soon we'll be allowed.
Oh my gosh. That's funny. So, your family, you're having your whole family kind of in that search and rescue / medical side of things. I get it. I get how you got the bug for this.
Oh yeah.
So now that you're in this, what was your first rescue? Like when that happened, walk me through it.
Yeah. So, I guess getting into when I went back to Australia, did some training to get that start and actually get into a job. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the training and the kind of getting into it side of things. But I mean, like most people, I think we're thrown in the deep end, right? Like you show up and you get some training, and it's super helpful training. But ultimately, I think that most people would agree it doesn't really prepare you for that first kind of rescue. So when I was working full time on that search and rescue ship in Australia, I was brought straight in. Most guys start as a rescue specialist, like in the Coast Guard or whatever. You start as a swimmer, and then either progress or you come through a different channel to get into that crew chief mechanic type position. But in my case, I was thrown in as a dual role. So I was hoist operator and a rescue specialist, and I did shifts doing both roles. So I got my first ever rescue as a rescue specialist. It took a little while to we didn't do a lot of hoisting, so it took a little while to go out and do one in anger. We did a lot of training, obviously, but it was actually, in hindsight, pretty straightforward. It was a guy who was walking along the beach, and the tide came in and it basically up against a cliff, and he ended up hiking up the cliff to avoid the rising floodwater or the tides, basically. It's like pretty standard stuff. And so we went out there, and this was 2011, and I do laugh now, like I've got video and stuff of it, and it was all pretty interesting. But we did a dynamic hoist deployment of me as the rescue specialist to the cliff, horse collar rescue strap type thing, and a double up extraction back up and out, and off we go. And I mean, now you look and it's like, oh, that was pretty basic, really. That's kind of bread and butter stuff. But
that's awesome.
At the time, that's like, for me, it's like, whoa, here we go, things are happening here, and like I'm sure everyone's experienced it, but that was kind of straight into it, right?
That's awesome. So, I mean, well, especially as your first one, now you're doing a cliff rescue. That's pretty cool.
And there was a little ledge, maybe the size of a coffee table or something like that we really had to stand on. But two guys, what it's like, two guys on there and trying to put a horse collar on. I mean, it's tight enough. Yeah, it wasn't the easiest thing you could do for the first one. So,
dude, that's awesome.
Right. And then, like I say, as a hoist operator, it took a little longer to get into it. But again, I felt like it was pretty, even now, like it would be pretty interesting to go out and do this. So we had like a whole bunch of flooding, and a lady got washed off the highway. She tried to drive through some deeper kind of floodwaters, typical thing, got washed off and pushed downstream, a couple of hundred yards or, 1,000 feet or whatever. And got jammed up against a tree, and she basically climbed out the window of a pickup truck and was in the bed of the pickup truck.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We got out there, and I was the hoist operator, and I had a really, really experienced rescue specialist. Luckily, he'd had 10 or more years of experience rescue specialist before. So he was really, really comfortable and kind of walked us through it. But it was not the best weather, lots of moving water, power lines in the area, then, like dynamic environment we didn't know how long that pickup truck was going to stay where it was. So we were kind of cautious of that. And so, hoisting down into the back of a pickup truck, horse collar, capture strap, direct deployment, and then rescue specialist and subject straight out of there. So that was, again, a bit of a trial by fire to start things off. I look back now and it's like, wow, that's pretty challenging for the first one,
Damn, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was good. And luckily, by that time, there was things like GoPros and stuff like that. So we were actually able to capture a little bit of that on on video and have it, which is cool to look back at now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's awesome to look back
A
on.
lot of people
man.
don't have that opportunity, right? Like, I'm
No.
sure your first rescue, there was no real documentation or anything of
Yeah,
it. So it's pretty cool to
nothing.
have that. No, I know.
My documentation is right here in my mind.
Yeah,
It's
I know. But at least you can embellish it, right?
Yeah,
At
yeah.
least you can't. Yeah, you could be like, yeah, it was 6 people and a grizzly bear. And...
As long as nobody else talks about it, then yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Dang, man. But now, all right. So now I'm going to move forward to you're with Blackcomb Helicopters, and the greatest part is the last time you and I were together, we were doing a training, and we were teaching search and rescue stuff, and in that, you and I got doing exactly what we're doing now. We start bullshitting about cool cases we've been on and whatnot. And you start showing me a couple of videos, and you start telling me like a couple of these cases you get on. And I'm looking at it, shaking my head like, this is we gotta, man, dude, you gotta come on. You gotta tell me some of this stuff.
That was the genesis of this conversation right now.
It totally was. So, man, let's get into a couple of these. Actually, if you don't, pick up wherever you want, because there's two that I remember specifically. One of them going down like river under trees and gnarly weather, like as far as fog coming in, and then you had another one too. All right, so hit me. What do you got?
Well, I think it's kind of starting from where I'm at now here in Canada, I guess, and then we can kind of touch on some other stuff after. So, like the first one, we've actually started implementing hoisting. These guys locally here have been doing short haul type rescues for 20 years, right, or more. So it's fairly well established practice. But the hoisting's fairly new here, and like a lot of search and rescue agencies in the US, they don't have hoist capable aircraft locally yet. A lot of the rescues that they do traditionally have been short haul. So one of the things, and that's why I got brought on here to help develop it, was a hoist program and start to offer that as a tool to these guys to start using it. So
that's awesome.
I think the first one that we actually were able to go out and do with our local team here, high up in the mountains, 8,000 feet, a climber had actually overnighted, got injured and wasn't able to be extricated overnight due to weather.
Oh man!
And so we went out first thing in the morning, fairly serious injuries, and we were able to actually go out and do. It was a fairly high dynamic hoist, 8,000 feet in the mountains in our EC-135, and we really didn't have room on the aircraft or the payload capability on the aircraft to go out fully loaded. So it was a fairly slimmed down response, I guess, from our side of things. But rescue it down and into the spot there, and then just because we didn't have really anyone to able to do things like taglines and stuff like that on the ground, it was again fairly limited response. We were able to do that kind of dynamic departure that you hear about it, lots of people talking about at the moment, even with a litter, and we were able to pick up and actually depart that scene without needing to use things like a tagline. And it kind of combined a lot of the stuff that we've been working up to and proved a lot of concepts that we've been trying to emphasize, like the advantages of the systems that we had and the tools that we had available. And on that one, it kind of all came together really well. And that was the first one that these guys were able to utilize the hoist on. And so I think that was really memorable in its own way, not because it was maybe the most complex rescue, but certainly very much a milestone locally here, and to be a part of that building up to that was really cool.
That's awesome.
So that was the first one, and that was only last year with these guys, so only fairly recently. But since then we've gone out and done a whole bunch more, and like I showed you some pictures and video of this one in particular that we did kind of later last year, and a kayaker actually capsized on a fairly high running river and injured potential spinal injuries and stuff like that. We weren't really sure at the time exactly what the deal was, but definitely serious injuries, and anything involving water, as you know, is kind of emphasizes things a little. It's another element of risk there. So late in the day, I mean, all the usual stuff, right? Like late in the day, getting dark.
Everybody's about to go home for the day.
Right, and the information wasn't, we didn't have all the information at that point, so we kind of said, all right, let's just go up and take a look at this thing. We were waiting for some information to come back. The understanding that we had was that they needed to use a rope access team to actually even get to the subject down a really steep embankment. Like it was at the water's edge, but it was quite a steep cliff to get down in there. So we were trying to get all the resources together, and the way that search and rescue operates here is there's independent teams. So there's rope teams and swift water teams and helicopter teams, and we had all of those teams all activated for this one task. So, you know, with poor weather and limited location, you know, there's not a lot of room to move in a fairly tight valley, and so it was lots going on. And we basically got out there to do our recce, and at that point we didn't realize, but the rescuers had actually got a lot further into things than we thought that they had at that point. And the next minute they're on the radio saying, "Oh, we're ready for pickup. Let's do this," you know. So
holy cow.
And it was kind of cool. I was really proud of the way that we worked through that, and we didn't rush into it. We took a step back, you know, ran our checklists, did everything we were supposed to do by the book, and ended up deploying. We already had rescuers on the ground through the rope access team, so we already had that, and we were able to actually get an empty hook into this person. And obviously the real challenge, and the part that I think probably sparked your interest there, we were really, really close up against a tree. And where they were was not totally kind of covered by tree and foliage, but certainly they were right up against it. And we had some concerns about picking this subject up, and actually they would have been in tree branches, and it would have been quite tight where they were there. So it was well planned. I think we discussed everything in advance and kind of had a really solid plan of how this was all going to look, but we had to actually pick the guys off the ground and then actually move out like to the center of the river before we could bring them up and back into the aircraft. So,
which was impressive to watch as well. Now, what you're failing to tell everybody right now is your altitude, which I'm going to bring up, because not only was they in a valley and you were above all the trees, it was like 100 and something foot hover.
At least, I would say, you know, estimate. I would say we were probably in almost 200-foot trees with the cliff. So it was a high hoist.
That's a high hover.
And
that's
I mean,
a high
for
hoist.
here, for us, it's not maybe super abnormal, but for a lot of people that haven't seen, you know, trees and steep valleys like that, and they were right down in it. So it was interesting for sure. I didn't feel it at the time. You know, I felt like we were fairly well prepared and briefed, and everything kind of went as planned. But to look back at it after, it's like, wow, that's, you know, I can see why people would be like, wow, that was really complex.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here looking at the video, like, are you kidding me right now? This is like well, all right. So let's call it, 180, 200 foot hoist. You know, I gave you 100.
Yeah, I think that's realistic.
It was a very high hoist, and the fact that you got in there with your conning and everything to get the hook directly to the rescuer on the ground was spot on. And it was that getting it down. I mean, at 200 feet, it's like
it's not easy.
It's not.
It's not easy for sure. And you know, we credit to everyone. I mean, it's not just me. We have some fantastic pilots here that we work with, and really, really experienced guys, and, you know, adaptable, and just through the work that we do here, we have to be able to adapt a little bit, right? Like, and so in that case, we were able to change a couple of things that we were doing, and the pilot was looking we have a bubble window on the
nice. Oh, bonus.
So he was actually not totally vertical referencing, but certainly looking somewhere different to what a traditional hoist, you know, reference points would be. And that was some of the stuff. And I mean, yeah, you've seen the video. The hover was rock solid, and that allows me to do my job, and we had really experienced rescuers on the ground that just did everything they were supposed to do. It's a team effort, right? It's not a one guy show. It's all the moving parts, and the aircraft, you know, did exactly what we expected it to do, and it just, everything works the way that it should. And that's when it's fun. And you know, that when things go well and everything works the way that it should, it's a pleasure.
But the other part of this, which I absolutely love, and this is one of the things about the video where I was like, man, that was brilliant, is you literally pick the victim up off the ground. So now the helicopter has the load, and then you just stop hoisting. You slide left. I think it was, you slid left about a count of like three count. Now you're in the middle of the river, wide open area for the most part, and then just hoisted him straight out. And I'm like, oh, you're not hoisting him through trees. There was no swing. There was no spin.
Nothing. No,
it was
exactly. And like I say, that's honestly, I'm not going to take anywhere near all the credit for that. You know, our pilots are the most experienced, like vertical reference type long line pilots. I mean, you know what it's like. You're doing a hoist and the load's got a bit of a swing.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. I mean, that's a thing that happens. You get a little bit of a swing going on in the cable, and I'll often hear from the front, "Oh, do you want me to fix that?" And they can feel it. If they're not looking at it, they can feel the aircraft moving around, and they can actually correct that swing for me.
And you're like,
well, what am I doing
got
here?
this.
Like,
I got this.
yeah. No, the best thing to do is let them fix it, because they're super dialed in. So in that sense, like picking up a load and just transitioning overhead to kind of center yourself over the load, that's intuitive for these guys. And you know, like I say, it's that team effort thing, right? But that's not anything out of the ordinary, and it's an everyday occurrence. So that you know, experience and skill set from external load type work translates over to the hoisting as well, and just the way they're able to fly the aircraft and stuff makes things a lot easier, which is we're really lucky to have that.
And when you got the guy all the way up to the top of the aircraft, I mean, you're bringing him in the aircraft, no problem. And then now, was it what I don't remember is was it you alone, or was the rescuer with you as well?
Yeah, so we actually, just to clarify, we didn't actually bring them all the way up and inside the aircraft. We were actually had pre-briefed to drop them. No, that's good. We were planning on dropping them just a short distance ahead
that's
on
right.
a roadway.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah,
we brought them up, you know, to a safe height below the aircraft, and basically just transitioned and got them to a roadway close by. So we will, as much as we can, and we talked about this the other day, we'll always try and, we don't want subjects, particularly injured subjects, on the line on their own. You know, we want to bring them up with a rescuer to attend with them. You know, the difference here is that we're a company, right? We go to work, and we're not a public service agency or we don't have that kind of flexibility that police and law and fire and those sort of guys have as public use agencies, like in the US, for example. We you know, we can't put untrained people on the end of the line. So
right, totally.
When you're riding up with someone with you, then that kind of alleviates that aspect as well. And I think it's just better practice to control things like spin and things like that. You got someone who's trained and experienced with the victim. So
so that's right. So you picked them up. That's right. I forgot about that. So then you basically air taxi with this, you know, and short hauled the guy for all intents and purposes over to a roadway, and then hoisted him right into the medical.
Totally. And that was one of the big things that there was advantage of the hoist as well, is that, you know, if that was a short haul, a true traditional short haul, and we had we would have needed a 200, probably 250 feet long line, you know, to get them up and out of that spot because of the tree height. With the hoist, we were able to deploy that full 250 feet of cable, but below the aircraft, so that they're not still hanging and transitioning that huge distance beneath the aircraft, which obviously increases the risk. And so, yeah, it was a good use of the tool for sure.
Oh, brilliant. Love it.
Fun.
Yeah. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Like I said, the video, I mean, it's incredible to watch. So if we ever get a chance to post it.
Yeah, we can get some stuff, and I've definitely got some good pictures there that kind of highlight the whole thing as well. So yeah, we'll see what we can get to you.
That's awesome. And then, all right, so now the next one that you showed me out there was another one, and there was like basically right on the riverbed, inside this little valley area. There was like a hot tub thing, and you know, a couple kids out there, or a couple guys got stuck, and I was like, what? So take me down that one too.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, I don't know. I feel like we're really lucky here. We're exposed to all this interesting terrain and tall trees, and it's, you know, the weather. It rains
tall trees. They're not just tall trees. They're like tall trees.
Right. Yeah. For a lot of people, they you know, if you're living in a lot of places around the world, you may not have seen trees like this. For us, it's normal, but yeah, for a lot of people, and it just adds another aspect to it, right? And like I said, it's always raining here. It's typically not, you know, it's right around that freezing temperature quite a bit of the year. You know, we don't get super cold temperatures, but it's, you know, just borderline snow type temperatures for quite a lot of the year. So
hypothermia does kick in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so the medical portion is obviously really important as well, and making sure that people are managed in the hypothermic way as well. So yeah, that was another one that we did where these two hikers basically got stuck with some rising floodwater. It was heavy rains at the time, and they'd gone out on a hike looking for a cool little spot on the river, and basically the river level came up and it basically split, and what was once connected to the riverbank then became an island effectively, and they were stuck out on this island. And so again, they spent the night out there in the end. And then we had rope teams there. The local search and rescue team had rope teams and swiftwater teams and everything kind of there. But the risk, I mean, there was like a small shelter on the island. They were able to basically shelter in place, and the risk of hypothermia in this case wasn't, significant enough to warrant risking volunteers' safety by trying to access this island in high flood waters and overnight, like in the dark, right? So, and again, I mean, going into this spot and trying to hoist people in there at night with a specialized aircraft, we don't have that capability at this point. But to try and bring in basically what would be the military or something like that to hoist, it's not, the risk wouldn't be worth it. I don't think, based on what they would do. So we went out there first thing the next morning, and we're able to hoist a rescue tech into that spot and basically retrieve these two people. And I think you saw the pictures in the video of that one as well.
Totally did. It was awesome.
Yeah, so the big learning point for me on that one was we were looking at it from the air at 150, 200 feet again, right? Like looking down into this spot, and we'd done our whatever you want to call it, an on-scene assessment or a recce or of the scene, and identified all the hazards and extensively ran through that, and we identified that the ground was uneven and there was some water, slippery. It was going to be, there was a whole bunch of hazards there on the ground, and they were all identified in advance. And then we did the rescue. Everything went great. We extracted the two subjects out of the river there in the island, and everything went great. And we got back at the end of the day, and we got a bit of a group information sharing platform that we use online to kind of share information and discuss everything, which was great. And some guys on the ground actually posted up, like the rope team and the swiftwater team that was on the ground actually posted up some pictures and videos from the ground of this whole thing. And I mean, you've seen the videos, right? Like these obstacles that we'd identified in and around the accident scene in the area, we're like, oh, there's some rocks and some boulders and some uneven terrain, and we're like, this is a concern. We just need to make sure that the rescuers got good footing when we put them down in there. And then you see the pictures and the video from after at ground level. I mean, these rocks like are the sizes of
10
school
feet
buses.
tall, and you're like, don't put them on top of that one.
That's a huge learning point. We just totally, and it's really hard to judge that stuff from the air, and especially 150, 200 feet up looking straight down. I mean, that it's there, that it's big and it's gnarly, but you don't totally realize quite how extreme some of this stuff can be. So that was definitely a learning point for me on that one. It's like, don't underestimate, or don't you need to overestimate almost.
Oh, absolutely. And really, it's, you bring up a great point there too, because it's so nice to have a guy that's on the end of the hook that actually knows what he's doing, a good rescueman, because
totally
he's going to give you good hand signals. He's going to maybe change direction. One of the things that we work with currently, I believe you do too, is a wireless ICS system. So now we're connected actually to ICS, even though we're on the hoist deck, and be like, hey guys, this doesn't look good. Let's abort this and try something different.
Totally. But, and our guys have been using, I mean, like I said, they've been doing short haul for a very long time here, and they've had a lot of experience and training and expertise doing that type of stuff. So a lot of that does transfer over to the hoist world too, right? But we have recently started we haven't fully implemented it yet, but started experimenting with a wireless ICS system, and I've been hugely impressed, with just how much it enhances the situational awareness and keeps guys hands free to be able to continue working, while talking and staying in communication with the aircraft. So it's pretty impressive technology for sure. It's something that I'd love to see, become more affordable and get out there more and become more widespread, because it's a really cool piece of tech.
But it's very much so. But like you said, to kind of circle back, when you're 200 feet in the air, it's a different view 200 feet in the air than it is when you're down there. And
absolutely.
And people forget this. And like you're talking about ropes teams and swiftwater teams, they don't quite understand that what we look at from the air is so different. And they're like, no, this is a good spot. And you're like, no, that's a shitty spot. You need something a little more open, or you need, let's do this, this, and this to make that a little more feasible for us in the air. So
and it's all about compromise, right? And that's why it's really important, even for us as guys in the air, to continually get training, I think, on what those guys on the ground are dealing with as well. Go and take a swiftwater awareness course, even if that's all it is, or go and take a rope access course just to get a better understanding. I like exactly what you're saying, where they don't fully understand, the kind of challenges that we're seeing from the
Right.
air. But at the same time, if you can get a better understanding of the challenges they're facing on the ground, then
Totally.
it helps you to understand why they're asking for what they're asking for. And
Yep.
you might think that, hey, they've picked this outrageous hoist spot, but maybe it's the only position where they've got a solid anchor point to clip into, or maybe it's
Right.
maybe there's a dangerous current or an eddy in the river that you can't see that they from the ground can identify, and they don't want to go anywhere near that, or whatever it might be, right? So just being able to branch out that training and just have a better appreciation of things kind of across the board.
Well, that's what's nice about you too, because you are a rescueman as well. So you being a rescue specialist on the hook, you understand about being down and what it looks like. So, one of the things that we always talk about, or, in training and whatnot, is the guy on the ground has to help the guy in the air, and the guy in the air has to help the guy on the ground. It has to go both
100%.
ways. You can't, because if you tie this big old ball knot of stuff and then send it down to me, well, you're not helping me out at all. And if I do the same thing on the ground and I tie this big old ball, like, oh, this isn't going to come apart. Well, yeah, you're right. And then when it gets to the aircraft, guess who's got to deal with it? You do. So you got to help each other out. And there's a lot
absolutely.
of that.
And you can kind of get away with one guy not absolutely nailing it or not being super experienced, but it's going to make your life challenging, but not impossible. But you put two guys in there together that maybe have that limited experience, and I think obviously the risk just escalates from there, and
totally
it just the chances of something not going to plan just go way up, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's crazy. And out of those two cases, you've got 3 lives saved right there, my friend. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, I don't like to call it live saves too much, but yeah, we made a difference. Put it that way. If we hadn't been able to go in and do what we did, the outcome wouldn't have been as good. Obviously, they would have been colder, they would have been wetter, they would have been maybe more seriously injured or worse. So yeah, it's nice to be able to come. Totally, it's nice to be able to come out and say that you made a difference for sure. Yeah. It's cool.
Man, awesome. Now you and I had talked about one other one that there's an article on, and which I was totally stoked to read, and that was a police boat that had flipped over, that had capsized with guys in the water. So, dude, and there's a little article right up with this one, which is on My Grand Prairie Now. And
there's a few around of that same thing. That was just one of the ones that I found online there. And I mean, being a law enforcement agency, they don't like to share too much information, right? Like it's not something you really want to be advising all over the internet. That's right. This incident happened, but yeah, there is some information about it out there.
But yeah, totally. So like basically a jet boat had capsized in the Athabasca River.
Athabasca, yeah, that's
okay. Good. Near Whitecourt. And the vessel crashed roughly 30 kilometers from the town around noon on Friday. 4 officers were in the patrol at the time, but all of them made it to shore and were being brought home by the Alberta Forestry.
Yeah.
So
that's a pretty vague article, hey? But
super vague.
Yeah, there was a little bit more to it than that, for sure.
Well, give me the rundown, man. You guys, hit me. What you got?
We can do it, yeah. So I was working in Whitecourt, Alberta at the time, actually, which is kind of directly above Montana for the US listeners. So the Canadian province north of Montana, quite a ways north. Like from the border, the US border, you've probably got to drive 10 hours north to get to Whitecourt. So and that's about halfway up the province. Like you're not even halfway to the top yet. So it's a big province for sure. But we were working there on a wildfire rappel crew. And our primary mandate was to initial action wildfires. That was what we did. We were not there as a search and rescue resource. We were not there, in any real capacity to support law enforcement or anything like that. We were exclusively there as firefighters. Basically, we weren't really. We had first aid training, like a 2-day course that you go and get and learn how to do CPR and splint people.
Yeah, put this on.
Band-aids and CPR. But that was really the only first aid that we were actually required to have. Now, one of the big things that I loved about that program was that it was, in my mind, it was cutting edge. Like we were pushing the boundaries of kind of what this group should be able to do, and the guys that they hired to come in and work for the agency were highly experienced guys. They had other jobs in the wintertime out. They were ski patrollers, or they were paramedics, or they were whatever, outside of fire season in the wintertime. And the beauty of that job, a lot of these guys had college degrees and all kinds of crazy stuff. So the people that we had were far more capable than that agency really maybe even understood, or maybe even kind of delegated that responsibility, or should have delegated that responsibility. We were a lot more capable than people realized, I think. And this call came in, like you say, noon on a Friday, that a police boat, I don't know if they were training or doing some kind of operation, they probably won't tell you, but they'd actually capsized their boat on the Athabasca River, and it was cold. I mean, that river is glacial to a degree, right? Like, it comes from the mountains to the west, and it's cold water. You don't want to spend a lot of time in it. And we didn't know whether they'd actually been, at that, I think the article said that they were on an island. We didn't know at that time whether they were still in the river, whether they were on the island. We didn't know where they were. All we'd heard is that, hey, this boat has capsized. We need to get something to go and take a look at this thing. And there really is no dedicated search and rescue resource anywhere near there. With the kind of standby times, like on that day, I think for wildfire, we were probably sitting on a 5 or a 10-minute getaway. So if we get a call for a wildfire, we need to be airborne in a Bell, I think it was a 212 at that point. We need to be airborne in 5 to 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
We're sitting there. We're basically sitting there with harnesses on
all the
for
time.
10 hours. We're sitting in our camp chairs in the middle of the bush, in harnesses, ready to go on a 5 or a 10-minute getaway on a launch time. So we were ready to go, and we got this call, and I think someone obviously in their wisdom recognized that we were there and we were available, and made a really, really smart call, I think, to actually utilize us for that purpose. So we picked up, we launched out of there, we located them. They had actually just made it to an island by the time we'd located them, so they were able to swim to an island as they kind of got washed down there. And but cold and wet, they weren't wearing all the protective gear that maybe they could have or should have been on that island. And so we were able to get in there, and basically we used the rappel resource to actually rappel basically the entire crew down onto the island, a crew of 7 or 6 guys, and we had a spotter in the aircraft. We were able to rappel our 6 guys down to the island. We had at least 2 guys on the crew from memory that were paramedics, like actual trained qualified paramedics, which is a way above. Like I said, we were only supposed to be doing band-aids and CPR, right? And we had 2 guys on a 6-man crew that were qualified paramedics. And
that's awesome.
Pre-delegated, here's the team of 2. We're rappelling you guys into the subjects, start treating for hypothermia, start treating for injuries, whatever. The other 4 guys, we're gonna deploy chainsaws. We didn't have the ability to extract at that point, so it was a one-way ticket, right? For firefighting, it doesn't matter, because you get to the ground and you're there to work. So the extraction capability, unless in like serious emergency when you're getting burnt over or something, we had that capability, but it basically never had been utilized, and we didn't want to utilize it. So we assessed the patients. They were cold and wet and had a bad day, but nothing. Once we were there and actually were able to provide some warming and that it went from being a serious problem to, we've got a little bit of time here to kind of treat and transport. So
nice.
Deployed a bunch of chainsaws and a bunch of gear. This is our typical thing we do in the bush: is start cutting down trees and actually build a helipad in the bush big enough to fit a Huey in. So, and that was our normal procedure for wildfire. We'd rappel into a wildfire, and half the crew would go start actioning the fire, and the other half's basically job was just to get an access for a helipad to get more crews to the ground without having to rappel. So we just went in and basically did what we do every other time. We started actioning the fire, which was actioning the subjects at that point. Slightly different mode of operation, but effectively a couple of guys just went in and went to work and started working on the patients, and the rest of the team started cutting a helipad, and we had them in and out within a couple of hours. And the crazy thing is we were able to get back to our base, reset the equipment, repack the ropes, refuel the chainsaws, and basically be ready to go. And that afternoon, immediately after, we got dispatched to a wildfire and actually went and actioned one of the better wildfires I've probably ever worked on. It was that afternoon, like a fully involved going wildfire that same afternoon. So, it was a cool day. We got to go out there and basically do everything that we were trained to do in one day, and it was way above and beyond what our mandate was or what our experience level should have been. And to be honest, we nailed it. We did a really, really good job. I was really proud of the team, and everyone did a really good job to go out and do what we were supposed to do. So it was super cool.
Dude, that is awesome.
Yeah.
You know, it's something I haven't experienced myself. I usually come in with a hoist.
Right.
And just, you know what? Lay down all the trees. Whoosh.
Right. And then you do it on the side of a mountain where you've actually got to build like some actual cribbing, or, you know, you're in a swamp basically up north, you know, once you get up towards, you know, like the northern Canadian Shield and stuff like that, it's swamp up there. So you've actually got to build like helidecks effectively to land these machines on in the swamp so they don't sink up to their belly. And yeah, there's all, I mean, that's a whole different world, right? But yeah, it's that kind of work and experience and training paid off. You know, we were able to deploy all those skills and use it for a purpose that we weren't really, you know, necessarily supposed to be there to do. So super cool.
Damn, man, that is awesome.
There you go.
I need to hang out with you more often, that's for sure.
Well, Queenie, I've heard some of your stories too, but I think the feeling is mutual. I would have loved to have come and hung out doing some of the stuff you guys were doing up there for a while.
Yeah, I had a good time for sure.
I bet.
So nice. Well, man, I can't thank you enough for sharing the stories.
Yeah.
So kind of the floor is yours, man. I'm willing to talk about anything you want to talk about that, you know, revolves around some of this stuff. And, you know, you have a very unique like story in general, because you've gone from firefighter, then brought into the helicopter company or into the helicopter world. And then next thing you know, you're doing hoisting to vessels for harbor pilot transfer to now what you're doing now. I mean, this is so like a very unique, like I don't know too many people that have done everything that you have done to follow that path. So
I would agree with that for sure. And I mean, I think something that I get asked a lot, and we discussed this offline beforehand, a lot of people ask me specifically, you know, how did you get into this? How I'm a guy on the street and I want to go and do what you do. How do I go do that? And
yeah,
you know, I think a lot of people maybe misunderstand or underestimate exactly what's required to get to the point where you can go out and pull guys out of rivers or hoist, you know, people to power lines or do whatever it is that you do. And
that was right, because you did that too, bringing guys to power lines and doing power line maintenance and whatnot, which is a whole nother.
That's a whole other thing.
It's not rescue, but it's working with hoist and helicopters and long lines around power lines. It's like, man, crazy stuff
I've done, you know, like it's a different world altogether. But yeah, so we can talk about that a little bit if you'd like.
All right, man. It is your podcast, my friend. Whatever you want.
No, it's your podcast. But I would like to actually just touch on it a little bit, just so
Absolutely.
You know, we can, because I know a lot of people ask me this. I get a message, you know, every week asking how they can get into this, and it's great to have a platform that I could maybe share a little bit of that.
Heck yeah. Come on.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think the big thing with my background and my experience, and a lot of people that want to get into it, is that you need to have experience to actually go out and do, you know, what I'm lucky enough to be able to go do now, and what, you know, guys like yourself are lucky enough to go and do now. You can't just walk in off the street and start hoisting. It doesn't work that way, you know.
Right.
And I'm sure you'd agree, when things are going well, hoisting is easy. You know, it's not very hard. When you have a good pilot and a good aircraft and good equipment and good training, hoisting is very, very easy. But when things start going sideways and things aren't going to plan, or you get thrown into a situation that you're not familiar with, or, you know, something deviates from the norm, that's where that experience comes into play, right? And so you look at the big players out there, you know, the big agencies that are out there providing search and rescue, and no one's sending guys out there with basically zero experience to go do these things. There's hour minimums and there's hoist minimums, and they want 500 flight hours, and they want 1,000 hoist cycles, and they want a paramedics qualification, and they want, you know, all these different qualifications before you can even put a foot in the aircraft and get to it. And so people come to me and they say, well, how do I get those 500 hours? How do I get those 1,000 hoist cycles to get into it and get the opportunity to go and do these things? And, you know, there's a bunch of different ways to do it, and no two answers are the same. And that's where I think it's really interesting, depending on, you know, what country you live in, what state you live in, if it's the US or Canada or whatever, the answer is different. And I think there's a few common kind of trends and that I can speak to. And I think the best thing, a lot of guys have traditionally come through the military, right? Like, and that is your ticket, because you can basically get into the military, and if you are a smart, competent person with the right skill set and the right personality and the right kind of, the right, you're the right person for the job, you'll get promoted through. And if you want to be in the Coast Guard or an Army or aviation or a Navy or an Air Force or whatever, you'll get put through the ranks, and you'll get to a place, if that's where you want to be, where you can actually go and do hoisting and rescues, and you build that experience. And honestly, it's on someone else's dime, they're because it's not cheap to go out and fly a helicopter. It costs thousands of dollars an hour. And if you want to go out and fly in a hoist equipped helicopter with 2 pilots on night vision goggles, it's tens of thousands of dollars an hour, and
Totally.
and then you go tell a prospective person that wants to get into this, well, you need 100 of those hours.
Yeah.
And they start crunching the numbers on their calculator, and they go, this doesn't work. I can't spend $1 million to get the training I need to go do. Well, some people can, but not many, right? So
right. Totally.
Must be nice. But so the military is one way of doing it. And for those guys that have come through there, they have a specific skill set, and that's totally applicable. You're doing it for the military, and that's a great job, and you do that for a career, and amazing. Like, thank you for your service, right? But for guys that, like me, that come in on the civilian side, that don't have the luck of or haven't gone through that pathway of going through the military, you have to find another way of doing it. And people don't realize maybe how many opportunities there are out there if you dig for them, and if you know the right people. And there's fire agencies, like I ended up going through. I didn't start as a hoist operator. We didn't hoist when I was doing firefighting, but I had the ability to fly in an aircraft for 100 hours a year for years on end. I had the ability to rappel out of an aircraft. So there's some rescue specialist skills there. I had the ability to go and start sending rappellers out of aircraft. So things like conning an aircraft and putting it in a position above trees and external loads. It's almost hoisting. It's very, very, very close at that point to hoisting. And so police agencies, you can go and be a cop and walk the street for a few years. And if you've got the drive and the determination to want to go flying, if that agency has an aviation division, there's a way to get going there. You look at Bristow and these big civilian search and rescue organizations which are starting to pop up. I think CHC maybe in Australia now as well. They've started cadetship programs where you can come in and you've got to have some skills, and you can find those online, like some of the prerequisites to be considered for a cadetship. But you don't need to have flying hours, and you can actually show up with maybe some kind of medical qualification or some kind of rescue background in some other field, and they'll actually give you the opportunity to get into an aircraft and go flying. And those opportunities, didn't exist previously, but they're ways to get into it. And so I think my point is, you need to find an organization like I did that gives you the opportunity to get into an aircraft, and then gives you the opportunity to progress those skills within that agency. And at that point, you have to be personable. You have to get to know people. You can't piss people off.
Right. Totally. This is a small world. Very small community.
Because it's a small industry, Quinny, and you know as well as I do. If you get a bad name in the industry or you get a bad reputation, you may as well go start flipping burgers. Like you're out. You got no chance. And so
be a nice guy. It costs nothing to be a nice guy.
Absolutely, and you are one of the best. So
Oh Jesus!
Anyone, I'm sure, but
listen, don't float my boat there. Come on now.
Oh, I'm deadly serious. So having a good reputation within the industry and being in good standing, getting to know people is free. When I got my first job with search and rescue in Australia, I paid for my training. I did. I'd already done a bunch of rappel stuff, so I had that experience. I went to a training agency in Australia, and I paid, at the time, I think it was 11 or 12,000 Australian dollars, and I went and paid for 3.5 hours in an A-Star to go and do some hoisting. And you get a ticket, and like I say, you're grossly unprepared to go out in the real world and actually start doing rescues. But I had a piece of paper, and that was more than everyone else had at the time. These rescue agencies were getting 100 resumes a week from guys that want to come and do rescues, and I was the only guy that had the piece of paper. And so you immediately jump to the top of the list, and it cost me 11 grand. But
you're at the top of the list.
I made that back in the first 2 months at work.
And
because you're getting paid, you're into it. So you got to spend money to make money. And I got in a car as soon as I got that piece of paper. I got in my car and I drove the entire east coast of Australia, and I stopped in at 10, 15 rescue bases.
That's
And
awesome.
while everyone else is making phone calls and sending resumes online through email or mail or whatever it was at the time, Rob's showing up on the doorstep and
Nice.
saying, I'm willing to travel. I'm here. If you want me to start tomorrow, let's do this thing. And again, your resume jumps to the top of the pile, right?
Yeah.
And they now know who you are and what you are about, and they know that honestly, they know that you're not a douchebag. They know that you're a reasonable person, hopefully.
Yeah.
And
Meet
if
them in
you are,
purpose.
I mean, you've shot yourself in the foot. But if you're a good person and you're willing to talk to these people and show that you're a reasonable person, then you kind of jump to the top of the list. So I think the pathway for everyone is different, but the moral is go out and try and find a way to
Find
get
a
into
way.
an aircraft
Totally
and get
agreed.
yourself into an aircraft and rack those hours and start accumulating those hours and get to know people, and the opportunities come. Every single job I've ever got in this industry was through people that I knew. On that job that I was talking about with the river rescue with the law enforcement agency, we were doing the same thing. We were sitting in the middle of a field somewhere, and the pilot who happened to be flying that wildfire machine worked for the company that was doing the marine pilot transfer. And he got off the phone and said, hey, I just got a phone call that we won this contract. Didn't you do hoisting? You should call this guy. And that's what got me that job, right?
That's
and it's all about who you know,
awesome.
and being in the industry and being around similar people that are doing that kind of work was the only reason why I heard about that job and knew who to contact. And that's what got me into that. And then you hear about these things through the industry, and so just you need to be involved in some way, whether that be through a volunteer search and rescue or fire or police or whatever. There's just, you got to find a way to get into it. So a lot of people ask me that question, and I kind of wanted to hit on it a little bit, and so
that's awesome. Yeah, and
direct them here, and people can come and listen to this now, hopefully, and get some insight more than I'm willing to type on an email or social media or whatever.
Yeah, it's awesome, and you're totally right. I mean, you and I know people from around the world, because you've got friends down in Australia, and as a matter of fact, you and I know one of the same people. I got friends in New Zealand, and the community is out there. If this is something that you want to do, you have to look into, start with local, and then go bigger, and then go bigger, and keep, and just
because there's 1,000 other guys wanting to do it too.
Yeah, exactly. It is, it's awesome, man. I love it.
Super cool.
Yeah. Now, how did you like your harbor pilot transfer stuff? Because that's
dude, it was really cool, honestly. Like it people, I guess, again, underestimate. I mean, you were up there in the northern reaches of British Columbia, and the weather up there is challenging. It's windy, it's wet, it's cold. It's a pretty challenging place to go flying. And you look at what search and rescue agencies do when they go out and they want to do a vessel rescue, pull an injured fisherman or an injured sailor off a boat, and it's challenging work. And yet we were going out there twice a day and hoisting people to boats in the same conditions, to the same little bridge wing the size of a coffee table, in pitching rolling seas. And we didn't have rescue specialists that signed up for that. We had marine pilots that were going to work. That was just their job. Like, their job didn't start until they set foot on that ship and started captaining the ship, right? So we were a transport service. We weren't there to try and save lives. We were there to take people to work. And to go out there and have that, I mean, it is a pressure to a degree to go out and keep these guys safe and get them to work and home every day, and basically do it professionally and do it in a safe way. It's a challenge, especially in the weather that we were given up there, and to be able to go out and do hundreds and hundreds of boat transfers over a course of nearly 2 years. I mean, it was, and to stand that program up, I mean, that didn't really exist before we got up there. So
which is
to go and do it for the first time is pretty cool thing to be a part of.
Totally. And for you specifically, you helped stand up that program, which was all hoisting marine pilots. And now you're at Blackcomb, and you're standing up this hoist program. Like, you are building programs from ground up. And
everyone in Canada is right now. To be honest, there isn't really any. I mean, there has been a few that have been around for a while, but the vast majority, or where you look at the way this industry is going in the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, you're going to start seeing a lot more hoist programs built from the ground up. And to be a part of, I mean, there's a lot of lessons learnt as you go through that process, and a lot of things that'll catch you out. And having learnt all that stuff once, up with that Marine Pilot Transfer Program, and then being able to bring those lessons learned to the program I'm at now, and it just builds from there, right? So yeah, it's really rewarding work to be able to be a part of something like that, for sure. It's different,
Awesome.
Very
Dude,
cool.
that's killer, man. I love it. I love every bit of it. Yeah. Well, I'll keep going. So whatever you want to talk about, I'm all in.
Yeah, man. We can. What else have we got? We can talk about maybe some training stuff as well, if you'd like to.
If you want to get into some training, let's do some training.
Yeah, we can do that for sure. So I think one of the big things that we discussed earlier, and I think, what's unique about my pathway to where I'm at now, is that I wasn't a 20-year cop. I wasn't a 20-year military guy, right? Like,
yeah.
And you go through that program, whatever that program is, it doesn't matter. You go through that program and you come into the program in 1993 or whatever, and you get your initial training, and you stick with that program for 20 or 30 years, and you see that program develop, and you get, you learn some tips and tricks along the way, and you become a really competent, capable operator over a period of time. But you become a competent, capable operator in that system, right? You become a really competent, Portland, Oregon police officer or whatever it might be, and you know that system intimately, and you're really good at that system. But there's a lot more in this world and in this industry than that one agency, right? And
very much so.
One of the things that I've learnt the hard way sometimes coming through my career is, I learned how to rappel in Australia, then I learned how to rappel in Canada, and then I went back to Australia and learned how to hoist out of an A-Star for search and rescue, and then I went to an S-76 in a different operation in Australia and learned how to hoist, and then I got trained by a training organization in the US to do marine pilot transfers in Canada, and then I went and got some training through another organization to learn how to do something totally different, and now I'm where I'm at now, and I'm building training programs on how to do something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to be able to draw on some of the experiences from each of those different organizations and take the very best things that I learnt 10 years ago in Australia in an A-Star and combine them with the thing I learnt last week out of a 135 here in Squamish,
Beautiful.
That to me is what's building out a really interesting training program. And you and I know, I mean, I'm doing some work as well for a training organization down in the US, and to be able to then go out with those guys and see how that organization is choosing to train people and the techniques they're choosing to deploy, that's not the techniques that they've learned from one agency.
Correct.
That's techniques that you've given to me, or I've given to someone else, or learnt somewhere that I've seen online or whatever. We're not closed in our thinking to only one way of doing things, or there's always something else out there that you can do differently or better, or apply those techniques. There's things that I learnt doing some power line work here that are amazing when you go and do a search and rescue. And I never would have known that technique unless I had gone out and done some power line work to learn that skill, to apply it to a different profession, right? And guys that have been a cop all their lives will never have seen that skill or never known that. But I can go out and train, a cop down the road or a firefighter down the road in this technique because I've learned it in a different part of the industry. And I think that's really, really cool. Like not many people, like you said earlier, not many people get the opportunity to see those different skill sets. And so I guess my point with the training is everyone has the power to control their own destiny, I guess, when it comes to training. You don't need to dig super deep on the internet anymore to find some pretty incredible resources and some different information that's out there. And guys are sitting around getting paid to be full-time rescue people or whatever you're doing with helicopters. You can go online and you can just read things and look at things online, and it's amazing these days what's available out there just by picking up the phone. And you can call me and I'll talk to you about helicopter, you know what I mean? Or you're a personal guy, you'll happily pick up the phone all day long. So
I love it.
The resources are out there if people are choosing to look for them. And I think that's really cool now that the training has just progressed so much to the point where you can get the information you need to do just about anything now.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about the whole training aspect too, because, when and like you said, you've gone to all these different agencies, you've gone to all this different work. I have a similar career path where I've been to multiple different agencies. I've seen how other things work. I've been able to work on many different helicopters. So a helicopter is a helicopter is a helicopter. It's got lift and rotation, right?
Totally.
A hoist is a hoist is a hoist. It goes in, it goes out, right?
Totally.
But there are different dynamics to every helicopter. And so, I mean, I remember sitting underneath the helicopter and I'm getting picked up off the ground. And then all of a sudden I'm back on the ground and I'm looking up. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, get off the hook, get off the hook. And I'm like, what is going on? They're like, we don't have the power for this. You're pulling us out of the sky. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And so when that stuff kicks in, you're like, holy cow, yeah. And you know, you flying on a 429 and there's a different rotor wash spot where something would kick out back and right versus back and left or forward and left. And it's like,
and you'll only learn that by either talking to someone who's done it like yourself or by learning it the hard way yourself, you know, and I like option A better than option B. I like being able to call up someone who I know, you know, if you want to talk about 429s, you pick up the phone and you call Gerald over in Ezamat and Gerald's going to tell you everything you need to know about a Bell 429.
Yeah.
And you're never going to run into problems in the real world and you're never going to have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Because there's someone else out there who honestly probably already has now. And that's the amazing thing about the industry, I think. And people are a lot more open than you think. You know, people think that this closed industry, and maybe it is in some elements, but there's a lot of people out there that are willing to share pretty much everything, you know,
and all of us,
if you know them.
Yeah. And all of us are willing to, you know, look at a problem and say, and I'm going to throw these guys under the bus, and I don't mean to do it. So I apologize to them, but you know, like let's just talk the lady that spun uncontrollably underneath the helicopter. Like that is such an easy fix. It is so simple. And yet, like, I understand exactly how it happened. I understand exactly what the aircrew mentality was there, because we've all been in a similar situation.
100%. And the funny thing is, Quinny, that you mentioned that when I was thrown in the deep end on my first day back 10 years ago or whatever, if I had been put in that position, and I can put my hand up and say this, I don't know that I would have done anything differently to them.
Right.
Because I didn't know any better either. Then, at that time, no one trained me 10 years ago in that 3.5 hours in an A-Star that I paid for out of my own money. Yeah. No one trained me how to deal with that emergency.
Yeah, that is an emergency.
And I would have been that guy 100%. Yeah. So I can totally empathize with the situation today, now, with the people that are out there and the YouTube and the information that's out there. That's preventable.
Yeah. And should we tell everybody what to do when you have an uncontrollable spin underneath the aircraft?
We absolutely can.
We should, huh? Like, stop hoisting and go into forward flight. It's amazing. You don't have to go that far or that fast. You only have to go probably 15, 20 knots, forward airspeed, stop hoisting, just let the rotor wash get behind you and poof.
Settle it all out and off you go. And you could prevent it entirely by, you know, things like using taglines and just understanding what your rotor wash is doing and planning ahead a little bit, right? So there's a lot of different things there, but the information for that kind of stuff is out there. And you know what I'll say? I was in a training course yesterday and I had a guy sitting at my table in the training course. And as soon as I said I was a hoist tech, a hoist operator, he said, "Oh, did you see that video on YouTube?" That's the first. Seriously, that is for the untrained person or someone that doesn't understand the industry. Yeah. When you say hoist rescue, people talk about that incident, and for better or worse, you can't. I'm not saying anything positive or negative. All I'm saying is that every single person in the world has now seen that video.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's what they think hoist rescues are.
Yeah.
And that's just so not accurate at all. You know, that's not
totally avoidable.
Hoist rescues
totally
are.
Avoidable. And that, to like you said, is a conversation with a guy down the road, an agency on the other side of the country, and some dude on the other side of the world that has had a similar incident, and it's like, hey, this is how you fix it. And you know, so anyway, training.
Go get some. We don't care who it's from. Just go get some.
Yeah. Make a phone call. Send me an email. Send Rob an email. He'll answer you.
Oh, dude, I'll happily talk about hoisting all day long, man.
Oh,
100%.
Awesome. Yep. So what do you have for lessons learned and, you know, especially out of our just now that with that conversation, you know, lessons that you've learned that
Yep.
that can help. Hit me. What do
Yeah.
you got? Because
No,
I've got a
I
couple
made
for
a few
sure.
notes here, and yeah, I bet you do. And we'll see how much our theories align here. But I would definitely say that, you know, doing what I've done and in a bunch of different places with a bunch of different pilots and aircraft and everything like that, and the lessons that I've learnt over that period of time, the biggest pressure that you'll feel is probably self-imposed.
Totally.
You are in control of that pressure that's being put on you to a degree, and it's definitely something that you can learn to cope with and how to deal with better, but you have control over that pressure. So I've written down some notes here. You know, things like just go slowly. You might think that you're working at a crawl pace, and you might think that you're going really slowly, but to everyone else around you, if you're a competent, capable operator, you know the old saying, "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." Right?
Love it. I love the saying.
Go slow, do it once, do it properly, and it's so true in this world because, you know, we work with a bunch of different people. We work with volunteer search and rescue guys who are super, super dialed in, but they're volunteers, and this is not their full-time job, you know, that they're paid to go and do. This mentality of rushing and it's contagious. You know,
Totally
if
is.
one person, particularly a person in some kind of position of what you call leadership, or, you know, a hoist operator in the back of a cabin, who's kind of orchestrating the whole show and running the show, that if he starts rushing or she starts rushing, it's contagious, and everyone else starts to feel that pressure and energy and starts to mirror it and starts to ramp it up, and then that's what causes, you know, even the hoist operator then to start rushing again, and the pilot to start gripping a little tighter, and the hover starts getting a little shittier. And, you know, these are things that you as a hoist operator who's kind of orchestrating the whole dog and pony show in the back can totally have control over. And take a breath, slow down, and be that Yoda in the back, that voice in the back, you know, that's going slow, and that's kind of dictating how this whole operation is going to unfold. Because when it all falls apart and the hoist operator starts losing his mind or her mind, then it's inevitable that everyone else is gonna everyone else is gonna follow shortly thereafter. So I think being adaptable, you know, within the scope of your training and experience and everything, if you get stuck in this, we have to do it this way, and this is the only way that we can do it, and anything outside of that, helmet fire, right? If you get into that, build that experience out to the point, and I'm not saying go out and do whatever you want or do, you know, everything, say yes all the time, but enable yourself by learning and through training and through all these other things to have a skill set that's varied enough to be adaptable, where you get out to a task or go out on a mission and something's not quite how you think it is, to be able to say, I remember this, and I know that we always approach forward and right to the target, but last week we practiced going forward and left, and on this particular case with the wind direction or whatever, or the cliff against us on the right, a forward and left approach might be better here. And don't go out there and be like, we always go forward and right, therefore we have to go forward and right. That's the only way we can do this. Being adaptable, and if it gets outside of something that your toolbox isn't big enough to cope with yet, just say no. You can say no. You know, like we say it all the time here. Don't make your emergency, someone else's emergency, your emergency.
Great advice.
Yes, they've had a bad day, and yes, this terrible thing has happened to them, but it's okay to say no if it's going to mean that if you say yes, you're going to end up in a fiery ball on the side of the mountain with them. You know, you're not of any use to anyone at that point. And I've had to do it. I've had to say no, and you know, and that's something that you got to live with, right? You got to say, well, okay, like I made a decision here and I'm sticking with it, and for better or worse. But don't let people push you into these situations. Don't let that pressure force you to say yes to something that you really know that you shouldn't.
It could be something as simple as taking off in poor weather, or you take off and go into poor weather, and you're like, you know, this is just at the edge of minimums. Well, you know, if a minimum wasn't good enough, it wouldn't be the minimum, right? So don't.
I agree for sure. And that's so easy to say no. And you know, I guess I'm really lucky to have always, you know, worked with organizations that have supported those decisions. And I get it when you work with someone who doesn't necessarily support those decisions to say no, and you feel like there's going to be some consequences for that, then that's tough. You know, to be put in that position. I certainly sympathize with those people, but yeah, it's your life on the line out there doing what you do, and it shouldn't be dangerous. You know, people consider that what we're doing is dangerous, and in my mind it's not, you know, because we're going out and making smart decisions, and we're well trained and well equipped. And what people see on YouTube is not what it's like in the real world. You know, if you saw all the briefings and the recce's and all the checklists that we run, and how much of this stuff is pre-planned, it's not eventful, you know, for us to the degree that it looks like from the outside.
Yeah. No, I very much agree with you. You know, flying is inherently dangerous, but you know, there's accidents when you're flying. Well, there's accidents in the car when you're driving down the road. It doesn't mean they're going to shut down every road. And
crossing the street in New York City is dangerous if you close your eyes.
Yeah, right. I mean, but if you're trained and you have knowledge about what you're doing, then everything, you know, and
but you set yourself up for success.
Exactly. And if you have, you know, you plan for the success, but when you have the emergency, be able to adapt and overcome it. And that's why you train.
Plan.
Yeah. You know, this is why you train.
Yeah, you shouldn't be going out and hoisting. You know, when we go out and hoist for training here or anywhere else, we do very little hoisting of just like, okay, it's going to be a single rescuer to this spot on the ground, and then we're going to extract them and be done.
Yep.
We don't need to practice that. We can put people on spots on the ground. You know, we go out and then we say, all right, it's going to be this, but midway through the hoist, you have a stoppage, or you have an engine failure, or whatever.
Yeah.
Because being prepared for that and being set up for that, when it happens for real, it's almost going to be uneventful. It's going to be like, I remember this. We practiced this last week. We have an engine failure.
Yeah.
Cut. You clear to fly. Done. Like it shouldn't be, and you've pre-briefed it. You've talked about what you're going to do. So the actual actions of doing it shouldn't be something you've never done before. They should come naturally, you know, instinctively.
And I personally, every time I do a training flight, I make sure I give myself 1 or 2 hoisting emergencies. And it could be as simple as a lost comm to a hoist. You call it a hoist stoppage. I call it a hoist failure. Same. The hoist stops working. Or I do an override where the pilot actually kicks in theirs. And I'm like, hey, I got an override, stop hoisting. And, you know, I go through all my checks. But I make it a point to give myself that just so I know, because I had one. As a matter of fact, I had one not too long ago, like 2 months ago. We had it was a fouled cable, and boop.
Yep, it happens.
And you're like, okay, everybody's safe. We're in a good hover, stable aircraft. Let's fix it. And we went about, we fixed it, and we moved on. And it was uneventful. Which is the way an emergency is supposed to be.
It should be,
right?
Yeah,
you have an emergency, and you adapt and you overcome. And then you come in and land, and everybody's home safely. Right. It's a non-event. It's beautiful.
Totally.
So, and that's why we train. So,
yeah, you have to be able to find ways to manage that and to utilize the time effectively.
Totally agree. All right. So with other lessons learned, we know a guy. We know the company that built their company around this in particular guy. And Dave, Rob, you know the story really well. So if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we mentioned earlier, we talked about lessons learned. We talked about training. I mentioned briefly that I do some training down in the US with an organization. And so I think, you know, to kind of close the loop on all of those conversations and just kind of sum it all up, I guess, I don't want to kind of get too deep into it, but the company I work for down in the US, SR3 Rescue, was actually founded after a fatal in Las Vegas a number of years ago now. And the police officer that was unfortunately killed during that accident, Dave Van Buskirk, his call sign was SR3 with Las Vegas Metro. So a couple of years ago, I crossed paths with Dave and Jason, who own the company at SR3 there, and they had just kind of founded the company and got it going. And basically, that accident that ultimately killed Dave was a dynamic rollout of a hoist hook, and the way that, you know, a lot of people see it was that it was a preventable accident based on information that wasn't really out there, and not a lot of people knew, or not everybody knew, including this agency, that that phenomenon was around and had the you know, potential to kill people. So as soon as I kind of heard that story of that organization and why it got going, I'm like, I'm on board with this. You know, this is not about money. It's not about, exposure or anything like that. It's about making the industry safer. And that's, that's their primary function. Yes, it's a company. Yes, it's out there to stay afloat, obviously, but the primary mandate of that organization is to improve safety in the industry and get information out there. And, things like what we're doing here, where we sit down and talk for an hour about the industry and how to make it safer and how to get that information out there through channels like things like podcasts now and social media and that sort of thing, has a huge impact on the industry. And it's something that I'm really, really like kind of, I guess, privileged to be able to be involved in at this point in the industry's growth. And yeah, I think, to look back at it now, if Dave was still alive, he'd be super proud, I think, of what we're doing. And
I totally
the point
agree
of
to
the
that.
company is to make, I would like to think that he's happy to put his name or his call sign on the product that we're delivering. So
yeah,
it's another thing to talk about the training. And I know we didn't get a lot into my experience with the instruction side of things. It's not really necessary, but it's just another aspect, and it's something that I'm really kind of privileged, I guess, to be able to be involved in. So
that's awesome.
Thanks, Quinny, I guess, for the opportunity to come on and chat with you and
Yeah.
share a little bit of my limited experience, but different, hopefully, to what other people. I know you've got some pretty high profile guests coming on here, so I'm excited to listen to the rest of your guests, but very, very privileged to feel like I'm considered in that group.
Well,
very lucky.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Rob. You have a very unique and different story than most, which is one of the reasons I really wanted you on here, because of that. And and you have demonstrated that just in this talk and everything that you've done. It's amazing. It's an amazing career as to where you're at, and I am thrilled to be training with you side by side, because you and I have a blast together, and you're a great instructor. So.
Oh, the feeling's mutual, Quinny. It's been too long since we last worked together, so I know we got to work together recently, and I know there's going to be a bunch of opportunities in the future. So, yeah, very very stoked to see that you've got this thing up and running, and I'm pretty excited to hear some of the stories that come out of it, for sure. I appreciate the opportunity.
They're fun. Then there are some guys out there that have done some incredible stuff. So.
Like you say, I think what I've done is you're calling it a career, but I feel like I'm just getting started here. It's like now I'm at the point where I can actually have a conversation with some of the guys that you're bringing on. So it's very, very cool, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Rob, I don't want to take your entire day. I can't thank you enough for coming on. This is awesome. This was a blast. So
yeah, I had a good time. I appreciate it, Quinny. Thanks.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to add just before we cut out?
I think we've hit on enough. The people they're probably paying for a translator to understand what I'm saying, and they probably charge by the hour. So we'll save them some money and call it there. Hey,
dude, I love it. At least I understand everything you're saying. I don't know.
Oh yeah, thank God. Otherwise, this would be a real challenge.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man. I appreciate it. And on that, everybody, we are out of here. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real ResQ podcast. Please take a minute and, as my daughters like to tell me all the time, like and subscribe. Oh yeah, I appreciate it. So I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story and would be willing to share it, I would be humbled and honored to have you as a guest. Or if you have any questions about rescue or anything else here that we talk about, please send me an email at therealresq@gmail.com. That's TheRealResQ@gmail.com. Or you can also check us out on our Instagram page at The Real ResQ, and that's at TheRealResQ. And for all of you standing the watch today, remember, when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, stay safe out there, everybody.